And so her question is, so she's removing these diseased plants from her beds, and what does she do to make sure that it's clean for next season? So this is a tricky question to answer right now because you haven't seen the whole kind of holistic system that I have, and you'll be introduced to all of it as we go through the course. So there are holistic pest and disease videos that are going to be released in the coming weeks. So that's the first thing that I just want to let everybody know. So don't worry if you don't understand everything I'm about to say. You're going to receive a couple of videos about pest and disease management that's going to make this even more clear. So to start off, tomato diseases, the most amount of diseases are in the tomato family and in the cucumber family or the squash family. So these are the families of crops for those of you who are unfamiliar. And what each family has in common is that they share similar diseases. They share sometimes how to prune them, how to harvest them, how to enjoy them, how to care for them. So families have a lot in common. And so in the set of diseases that could happen with your vegetable garden, tomatoes and cucumbers have the most number of diseases. They're the two harder plants. And when I say cucumbers, I should say that cucumbers and squashes together, because both of those have the same disease family. With that said, the rest of these families don't have nearly as many diseases to worry about. So if you have tomato diseases or if you have squash or cucumber diseases, you're not alone. So tomato diseases generally affect those in the tomato family, but some of them also affect the squash family. So some of the ones that you see here, don't worry if you aren't familiar with these right now. You're going to learn a little bit more about them later. So some of those diseases will also affect squash and cucumbers. So if you were to grow squash and cucumber next year in the same spot, they might be affected. But the good news is that most of the other crops are unaffected by those tomato diseases. So if you were to plant any one of these other crops in any one of these other families in the same place as those tomatoes, more than likely you're not going to see that disease again. So that leads me to one of the best ways that I know how to prevent pests or prevent diseases from returning. And what it has to do with is crop rotation. So a lot of people, when they hear about diseases and trying to prevent diseases in the garden, one of the things that people say is that you should intercrop, and that will help keep diseases at bay. You plant things from different families together, and you can help keep pests and diseases away. And that's true to a certain extent, but more importantly, and this is what a lot of people get wrong when they first start to garden, is that you want to leave time between the first time you plant a tomato plant and then the next time you plant a tomato plant in that bed. So you want to figure out a crop rotation that's going to allow you to rotate or to not plant tomatoes in the same place. Now, tomato diseases, some of them can last up to 3 years in the soil. And there's just a few of them. Many of them will disappear pretty quickly, but there's a couple that will live in the soil for several years. And so what you want to think about is a plan that each year you do pretty close to the same thing, but you basically are rotating. And I'm going to share in Module 4, so don't worry if you don't understand this right now. Module 4, we're going to talk in depth about plants. But one of the biggest things you can do for your success in terms of keeping pests and diseases at bay, year 1, you have your tomato family crop and maybe intercropped with a couple other things, basil, parsley, maybe some garlic, some other things. You have that year 1 in a bed. The next year in that same bed, you would rotate to the cabbage family and intercrop it with some other things. Maybe you put in some chard, which is in the beetroot family. You could put in some other things as well. And then because those crops are not affected by that tomato family set of diseases, the next year you put in the squash family. Now I said that few tomato diseases go to 3 years in the soil. There are a couple, but for the most part, if you let that, if you starve it out of the soil for that season, and then you come back year 3 with a squash plant, more than likely it's not going to come back. And so you can intercrop your squash family with all kinds of things. Maybe you want to plant your radishes with your cucumbers, maybe some radish, some leeks, and some cucumbers as a mixture, maybe some lettuce thrown in there. And then in year 4, then you can do a mixture of pretty much, you know, anything you want that are not in the tomato, cabbage, and squash family. So you could put in there legumes and chard and spinach and onions and leeks and all kinds of stuff, and just do a mixture and keep rotating. And so what you're doing is each year you're going to have the same crop plan, and it's just going to shift. If you do this right, and I'll show you how to do it in Module 4, you're going to use the same crop plan pretty much every year, and you're just going to rotate through, and it's going to make life easier in the long run. The first time you set it up is a little tricky, but then after you figure it all out, then you got the system down. So this is one of the best things you can do. So right now, I know that Kathy said she had something like 15 beds. I know this from another question that she asked. She has 15 planting beds. So maybe of those 15 beds, 4 of them, I'm rounding up to 16 beds, but maybe 4 of them are tomato family one year, 4 of them are cabbage family, 4 of them are squash family, 4 of them are a mixture, and you rotate through. You can also, I've also done a 3-year rotation where it's basically just tomato family, cabbage family, squash family, and all those other crops are intercropped in, and you rotate through that way, and that's worked for me as well. So if you had 15 beds, you could say 5 of them are dedicated to your tomato crops, 5 to the cabbage family, 5 to the squash family, and then intercrop in all those other beautiful, wonderful things that you want as well. So that's something to think about, and we're going to move into Module 4 in just a couple weeks, and we're going to go more into depth into this. So that's future thinking, Kathy, for those tomato plants. And then what do you do now? So now you want to focus on that soil fertility, and you've already done some of this with adding your compost tea. So when you have healthy plants, they're less susceptible to disease. One of the things that's really beneficial is worm poop. So this fall, you might want to add some of that worm poop in. And the reason I say this is that when farmers did tests and they added worm poop to seeds and seedlings, what they found is that adding the worm poop reduced something like 90% of the pest and disease issues that they saw in the field. So this is like a super powerful thing that you can do for the health of your soil. Tons of beneficial bacteria in that worm poop. So that's something to add if you haven't before. And then your next steps are all about, let me go back to your question and make sure I cover this before I jump forward. Okay, so there's nothing you can, you don't want to kill everything in the soil, right? You've got a lot of great things happening in the soil already. So if you can put in place a rotational process of those crops, that's going to be the best way to just starve the disease out of the soil. So that's this.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And for more simple and practical gardening tips, subscribe to Grow Your Own Vegetables. For more tips and updates, visit gyov.org and join our growing community.